Hi, everybody. It's Ed, Krista from the Krista and Ed Show, and we're super excited today because we've got a new guest, and she hails from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Kelli Sample is a sales and business strategist. She works with entrepreneurs, small businesses, professionals to help them create a repeatable, successful sales system and to have unshakable confidence in sales conversations so they can naturally and quickly convert more sales, more profits for people's businesses. So we want to welcome you. I guess you've been in high ticket sales for 15 years, and then you did 6 years of sales training, and then you kind of gave it your corporate America job up and said, okay, I'm going all in and starting your own business, and you're an entrepreneur, and you're helping other entrepreneurs. So we want to really welcome you. We appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me. It definitely is a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. So Kelli, he just gave a brief introduction of what you do, but obviously that you have a lot of probably really cool stories to tell us. But so just if you can quickly tell us in your own words what it is that you do, why you do it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about, the pivot on you leaving your corporate job, because I did that as well. And it's a scary decision. Yeah. I think it took me 3 years before I did that. So let's hear what you say about that.
Yeah, so I'm a sales and business coach, and I also work strategy with people. So that's why I call myself a strategist, because a lot of coaches are kind of there to guide people, but not really offer insight and offer ideas and strategy. And so I do both. Having a lot of sales experience and sales training experience, that kind of led to that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I really do is I work with the solopreneurs mostly, those people that have a really great service or a product that has been within them, and they're really good at what they do, but they're not always good about speaking about what they do and telling other people about what they do. Yeah. And when I was in sales training, it was great. I was working with salespeople all the time, but I was seeing the entrepreneurial world that I wanted to be in, and I was kind of dabbling here and there, and I was seeing a lot of people really struggling with that message and struggling with that conversation of the sales, because either they thought it was like they had to kind of go all out and use all the tactics, which then becomes very in your face, pushy, inauthentic, and it isn't good for them either.
Natural. Yeah.
No, it isn't good for them either, because they're trying to become somebody they're not in that moment.
Yeah.
Or what they do is they totally talk about, sales, if I listen well and if I serve, it'll just automatically happen for me. And it's like, okay, great. But how many times have you been sitting there helping and serving your friends and listening to them and being and sharing and everything, and nothing happened from it? Yeah. Or you have a zero, a goose egg in your bank account because you're not getting paid for that.
Yeah.
And that was like a sore spot for me, and what really inspired me to say, you know what, I want to work with entrepreneurs. It's great working in corporate. It's great working with teams of, bigger businesses, but I really want to focus on those people that can make a huge impact in the world.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. It's funny because that topic kind of goes also into, when you're working with entrepreneurs, to understand that when they have employees in a team too, that whole culture and way of thinking can transcend to that. Mm-hmm. We mentioned earlier in the conversation, one of our friends contacted us yesterday, and he was a cop, and he said, wow, you're talking kind of directed to entrepreneurs and stuff. He's like, but just so you know, I'm getting so much out of this. And he started talking about, the dynamics at the office and the police force and stuff like that. And I thought it was really cool. So as you were talking here, I realized when I worked in the corporate world, I think if I had, some direction or, whatever in the type of thinking in sales, even though the industry was utilities and I wasn't selling, I would have been maybe a bit more comfortable in networking situations. Mm-hmm. When I first met my husband, or Ed, he still is like an Uber networker. He loves to go to those things. And until I started my own business, I didn't understand the value in it or whatever, right? Now I totally get it. It's about relationships. But he used to always say okay, so what are you going to tell people you do, right? Because they just ask you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I was like almost embarrassed of where I work because I felt like I'm going to have to sell myself if I tell someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would be like, I'm just going to say I work at Wendy's and flip burgers. Like, I don't even want to talk about it, right? It doesn't define me, you know?
Yeah.
But now that I'm starting to understand, you know, the psychology and more behind it, it's actually not like that at all. You don't have to do that. So I think it's really cool what you're doing, and it can help people even further than just, you know, the solo entrepreneurs. So
Well, and the interesting thing is no matter what business you're in, no matter where you work, you always have to sell yourself.
Yeah.
And it might be in an interview, it might be asking for a raise, it might be even just trying to get somebody to jump onto your idea. My husband just recently had an opportunity for another job at his company, and he had an interview. And so I was teaching him how to interview using sales skills.
Yeah.
right.
Because you really have to do that in an interview in order for people to say, wow, you really know your stuff. I want you to be here, but not so much where it's like, okay, I'm the best thing ever and you need to do this because of this and that, but it's a conversation back and forth. And knowing how to do that is really awesome. And sales is a skill you'll use for your life.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you can weave the fabric of, it's like somebody said to me many years ago, the secret to success is sincerity. And I think the way that I've always approached communicating with people is being very sincere and passionate about what I am communicating to them, or I'm trying to sell them, or, what they need or what I think they need. Right. And that speaks to it. So I kind of like how you said that. It's like in the statement you have on your site, it says, don't be weird, be you, sales with authenticity. I was like, oh man, she used that. I would love to use that. But yeah, I mean, that's a big component. People can see through stuff these days, right? If you feel very insincere and you're just kind of like, here's the shiny, buy it. And of course, some people will, but I just think of a lot of people where they, the math makes sense. Everything that you're presenting to them makes sense, but in their gut, something just doesn't fit. And they're like, yeah. And you don't know why. So instead of trying to just be salesy and a showman, why not just be authentic? So I'm assuming, that your approach is.
And that's so true too, because, the thing is the landscape has changed, and being marketers and in the marketing world, there's so much stuff as far as where people can find you, see you, and learn about you. Whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, they might look you up in, the yellow pages, or they might, maybe have a website that's very, very primal and, basic information, but they can't really find out a lot about you, just what you're wanting to tell them. So people could go into the situation and create a situation or create a context around who they are, or be a showman, or have a personality that they put out front. But now with social media, with everything that's out there, you can't, because you're going to get caught very quickly.
Yes.
And if you're trying to do that, it's just a lot of extra effort. And you know what? And it doesn't feel good either.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody who in their business that wants to pretend that there's somebody else. I mean, we do that enough, like, in other places. Like, why would you in the primary area?
So done with that.
Right?
Yeah.
My hair is not naturally blonde, just so you know.
Right?
Neither is mine.
Or you pretend not to be angry with that person sitting next to you that you've been arguing with, and then go like, okay, we gotta show up and be happy or presentable at least.
Yeah.
But life happens.
In saying all that too, what I love right now, and there's an education piece behind it that is so cool because of social media though, and the internet and other platforms. You really don't have to necessarily have a whole bunch of big budgets, or, that typical, sales team person like you were just talking about that we used to have. Now, sales and marketing are really the foundation and the core of any business, right? Because without that, you're not going to continually have those leads or whatever it is that you need to have. So what you're doing is so important, especially for, like you said, the solo entrepreneurs. It's so cool because not everybody even knows where to start or how to do that. But it's a lot easier now to do that and have a business if you can get your message out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and one thing too, with the difference between marketing and sales, a lot of people don't necessarily know the difference, right?
Yeah.
But the marketing is what attracts people. It brings them in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the marketing can sell through depending on the price point.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not selling like widgets or something lower price, you can sell a lot of things with never talking to anybody and never having to have a sales conversation.
Yeah.
But now if you have a service, you have to have a conversation with somebody at some point, because they're not going to buy just off of a great website or a great funnel. You know, it will definitely put their level of qualification and interest higher. So now the conversations you're having are more direct and more, you know, again, qualified, but you still need to have the conversation.
Right.
And
the goal is to keep going like this, right?
Yeah.
If they're not working together, then you might have a bit of this, and then it's going to, and you're always going to be doing this. And I know I've done it, right?
Yeah.
I still do it sometimes.
I've been on that roller coaster.
But,
Right?
but you're right. Marketing, advertising, and sales seem to be kind of all jumbled in together, but
Yes.
they are very, very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And also one thing too, you know, with marketing efforts, it's, I'm sure you guys hear this having, you know, in being in the marketing, is that when people feel that they're not successful, a lot of times they blame it on the ads, or they blame it on the marketing didn't get the right people to your door. But sometimes you do have the right people to your door. You just don't know, one, how to recognize them, or two, how to actually tap into what they need so that they can feel that connect.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I see, and I talk a lot about, is our language that we use. You know, as professionals, we develop a language around our expertise that, you know, that we get from lots of time, you know, years being in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And our prospect doesn't necessarily have that language. They may have heard a couple of the words, but they may not necessarily know what all of that is. And if we start talking that language and that higher level, it's like talking to a little child with these big 10-letter words. You know, they don't get it unless you add some context to it and you teach them those concepts, right? And that's your job, and that's why you're in the service industry you are. But the biggest mistake, if you don't do that, though, is that they feel either that they are either underqualified to work with you, and then they kind of opt out, or they feel intimidated and they just agree with you, and then they're just kind of waiting for the conversation to end, to disappear.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
It's funny you bring that up, because Krista's mentioned that to me before. I get excited about something with SEO or whatever it may be. And he's like, okay, you're talking nerd here. You're talking, you know, like this is not something that's relatable to the average Joe. Yeah. And even if you're excited about it, maybe they feed a bit into it. But it's interesting you bring that up, because a lot of people go, oh yeah.
But it's understanding.
Fade away.
It's understanding, you know, like who you're talking to, but also that they're coming to you because they need a problem solved. They don't want to know how you're doing it. They just want to know what is it that you're going to, like, how are we getting to that end result, right? So, you know, and we have talked about this a lot too, because again, maybe because I'm high D, whatever, it's like, I always look at the big picture, right? Like way over there, whatever it is, right? And then it's like, I dissect it all back, and that's where the strategy comes in. So to me, it's like, okay, great. You can sound really smart and confuse someone, because most people, especially if you're in a boardroom, right? They're going to say, yeah. And if there's other people there, they're not going to say, well, I don't know what you're saying, because there's egos, or people like to feel like they're smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are. You should never know what we're talking about, or you wouldn't be here asking for the service, right? So it's great. So you'll get that sale. But you know what happens is then the project starts, and as time goes on, there's disappointments because that communication wasn't really understood on the other end necessarily of what they truly did need or want, because you just have this happening, right? So I feel like at the beginning is the best part, to go through all of that, make sure that everybody understands, you know, how it's going to work and why, because what you want is long-term, you know, retention, not just for the money, but for to be able to actually serve at your fullest and help, and for them to get whatever it is that you're giving them, right?
Right. And, I mean, it's so important too, to also understand where people are as far as their behavior styles and, their thought process too, because you speak to people differently. And in sales conversations is not the place to bring up all of those details. You get somebody buying into the bigger picture. Yes, there are some people that need the details in there, but it also has to be about really what they're going to get, what's that outcome for them, how is it going to feel, how is it going to look, what's that big picture, and paint that for them in order for them to really decide. In fact, that's where decision happens, is in the emotion attached to the details.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I have a client where it's like you get excited, right? So I'm going over and overwhelming him and not realizing like, oh, we're gonna do this and then this on the back end of your site and and then finally he just looked at me and he was like, Ed, I trust you. Just do honestly, just do what you got to do. Like seriously. And it was because of another client that referred me to him that loves me and saw the results.
Yeah,
I already had that kind of pre-framed. He bought in already, but I'm the kind of guy who's like, oh, I'm going to make sure I got to add value and I show him the rationale of why. But he was like, I own a trucking company. I don't care. You're like, okay. All right.
It's great to see that you're passionate about it, because that just means, wow, if he's so passionate about it, he must kind of know what he's doing at least, because he's really interested in it. Like, I would love to work with you in that instance, because it's better than somebody that's just like, oh, okay, you need this.
Yes.
All right, you need this done. All right, I can do that. Okay. And then you're like, I'm not quite sure. Like he seems more like I'm burdening him than actually anything. So it's good, that passion, but sometimes you do have to like match your levels too, thinking from like a level of 1 to 10, if that person's energy level is at a 3, you can't come at them with a 10.
It's like,
because you will totally like repel them, push them away, scare them even. But if you're at a 3, you can come at them with a 5, and your energy will actually bring them up the scale. And as they come up, then you can express more, but you just can't come at them full force at a 10 with a 3. It's like shouting at somebody that's whispering, it's shocking almost.
Yeah.
When you say that, it just reminds me, I mean, it's been years, but when I joined my first network marketing company, and I was like, oh, I'm going to sell this really expensive skincare, right? And that's what I did to everybody. And it's, it's like $400 for the whole package. And I was like, oh, I have like 500 friends on Facebook. I haven't talked to them since high school. And I like, now when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, how embarrassing. Why did I ever do that? Right? But it was like, I was like, oh my God, this product is
You're so
good.
excited.
And I know all that stuff, but I didn't even educate anybody on it to begin with. I just kind of spit it all out there. And then it was like, okay. And like, how dare I expect someone to spend $400 with me because they know my dad's cousin's mom,
Well, and that's actually a true case of not always knowing your audience too. And it's not necessarily how dare they me think that they might spend $400. It's how dare I think that this is my client, that everybody that is my friend or family is now going to be my client. And that's what network marketing companies tell you. And that can be a trap. That's why it's got such kind of a negative connotation to a lot of people, because you get, they pump you up. You get excited about this opportunity. Now you want to tell everybody, but they basically tell you to just, like you just got to talk fast and tell them about it. And
I don't even know if they told me that. It was just that I was so like, oh my God, okay, but it, like, now knowing what I know, if I joined one, I would crush it. Like, I know that I would, right? But I'm on a different path. But it's like, okay, there's way more to this than just buy this, right?
Although I would say the hardest people to do business with are your friends and family.
Oh, totally. Because they're not necessarily your clients.
All that.
They may buy one thing from you as an obligatory, buy, but then they're done. And then it creates kind of a negative relationship, because now whenever you talk about your business, whether you're talking about it in the context of just telling a story, they're going to think you're always trying to sell them something because you've already kind of pushed that. And so that's where you get this barrier. And believe me, network marketing, there's some really great companies out there. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
you learn how to do it, it's great. I love supporting my friends that are in network marketing. So I'm not talking down about that, but what happens a lot of times, newbies especially come in and they come full force, or they, you know, and they turn people off, not because of necessarily who they are, it's just how they're being in that moment.
And you're setting yourself up for failure, really.
Yes.
It's disappointing, right? After that first 30 days, when all of a sudden everyone's gone, no one's answering your texts anymore. They've unfriended you on Facebook.
I literally had that the other day from a buddy on LinkedIn who I haven't talked to in years, and he's trying to sell me like phone stuff for something, and I was like,
okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I immediately have the guard up, right? You're immediately like, okay, deflect.
Well, I love those messages. It's like, hey, and you're like, hey, and they're like, hey, I'm having this party and I'm selling. It's like, wow, like, can you say, how have you been? Tell me a little bit about, like, where's that middle conversation that would happen if you were even face to face, you know?
Yeah.
So how long have you been helping entrepreneurs?
So I have been full-time in this business a little over a year, about a year and a half now. I quit my job last year in April.
Yeah.
And so it's been full force there. Before then, I had kind of been dabbling and learning and being in networks where I've been kind of helping, but never really monetized it too much.
Yeah.
The time constraint with my work and my travel schedule with work was one of the pieces that kind of stopped me from that, but also just a little bit of that fear of jumping into that space. So I told my husband, I was like, there's a point where I need to either say I'm going for it or not. And in my job, I loved what I did, but it was a job that required me to travel a lot.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't working anymore for my lifestyle, my health, my, like, you know, I mean, when you're constantly out on the road and in planes and hotels, you know, it adds years to your life. I feel like I went from looking like I was 25 to all of a sudden like 50 over in like 5 years. I'm like, oh my God.
That's what happened to me.
I clearly have been flying a lot lately.
Right. Well, it does. It's so dehydrating and just like the energy and you know.
Yes, I did that myself for 6 years, traveling, flying almost every day. So I can totally relate to that. That's about how long I did that too.
No, just kidding.
Right? Yeah.
23.
I've rehydrated now, so I gained some
younger women. Oh, sorry. Trying to, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Throw you. That didn't work. Anyways.
You got to know your audience.
That's right. I'm trying.
You got a different audience that might have hit.
Yeah. So one of the cool things when I was just checking you out, because I was stalking you a little bit, and you're talking about like you do some consultation work and you'll always say, listen, I'll give you at least 3 actionable things. And I thought that intrigued me, like 3 actionable, you know, things that you can use to improve your sales right off the bat. And I thought that was interesting. So obviously you have like a core kind of foundation as to the things that you see are a problem. Do you want to speak to that at all? Yeah.
Oh my goodness, putting me on the spot. Yeah, giving away my secrets.
The flashlight is on now.
Right. You know, so one of the first things, and I kind of touched on this already, is you have to identify what your language is and what your client's language is.
Yeah.
Big piece. And you need to create that bridge. If you can talk your language, you just have to make sure that you're creating a context around it. And what I mean by that is that it's not just the words, but it's also like the world that the words live in. So if I'm describing SEO, so I don't know a lot about SEO, but I know that it's technical. I know it's about the words. It's about kind of all of how it fits in cute, like in the algorithms, right?
Yeah.
So if I was describing that, I would say, you know, so SEO is important because, and I would give a reason why it's important and why it's relevant to anybody. So somebody can say, now, oh, okay, now I get it. Like I need this because I want to be known. I want to be found.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? That's the key thing. And then you might be able to add then a little bit of the technical thing, like, and talk a little bit about the algorithm is that there are some key things, but then you bring it back to what it is that they want and their language and say, so, you know, when you go into Google and you search, I want to find, let's see, I just got new tires, tire, you know,
or if you want to find the
whatever.
Krista and Ed Show.
Oh, there you go. You know, and or something that's more broad though, because if they're looking for you, they'll find you.
Yeah.
But you know, that is related, that I can then find you by using that search. And oh, okay, I get it. Like, I want to be searchable. And so that kind of links it together. It's kind of like a sandwich, you know, start at their level, bring in a high level thing, come back, wrap it up so that they get that understanding. So first of all, that's one of the biggest principles, is understanding your language. But number two, it's amazing how many people cannot tell you their top 5 benefits of their service or product. And a lot of times they'll tell you how it works. And we talked about, you know, that how people don't necessarily care the how, they want to know the why. They want to know what it does for them. And so when I ask this, like, what are your top 5 benefits? Sometimes people got to stop and think. But the thing is if you're in a networking meeting, or if you're somewhere with a prospective client and they ask you what you do and how you serve people, and you can't tell them at least 5 things, and 5 things that are, you know, again, appealing to them, you've lost them. You've lost them the minute you say, because it makes it think like you really don't know what you're doing. And it might just be you're just unprepared.
Caught in the headlights, so to speak.
Yes. Right. So
that was me. Like, when I did work in my corporate job and I had opportunities, you know, to tell people about it, I was unprepared, because I was like, and I was caught on the technical stuff, right? Like, well, we liaison between the retailers and the distributors, and there's transactions, and they're called SROs. Like, what? Okay, bye.
Over my head, right? You know, okay, gone. And then probably the third thing I would say is that it's a mindset thing. It's that people are afraid to ask for a certain amount of money, or they have context around what, you know, making money and how much money that they can make in their life. One of my mentors likes to call it her having level. You know, it's like, what are you allowing to yourself to have? So some people, it's like, I can ask very easily for somebody to pay $2,000 for my services, but if I ask for $10,000, oh my God, everything in my body cringe, like I can't get the words out, or it get, you know, sometimes I have people do an exercise in a live, like when I'm talking live, I have them create a sentence that they say with something that's very comfortable, and then one that's a stretch number, and then one that's like a way out of the air, but like would be like a really cool thing if you could ask for that, but it's kind of scary. And I have their partner kind of watch what happens with their face and their body as they're saying it. And it's amazing how people, like, their face will cringe up. I was with one lady doing this, and she closed her eyes before she said the number. And the body language is so significant, because if you're face-to-face with somebody and you say, hey, you know, the investment to work with me at this level is
and then you look away.
It's like you can't even keep your eyes open because you don't believe it. That belief in yourself and what you have. So a lot of my work does go into also the belief behind it, and setting pricing structures that really support you, but also make sure that you're not giving away the store. Like, I think one of the biggest misconceptions with coaches especially is that in order to serve, like, you shouldn't have very high prices, and that people are being greedy if they're asking for more. But the thing is I can give more. If I charge more and I work with less people, I can give more to the people I'm working with.
That's a hard concept. Like, I've spent many years in agency work and digital marketing, and I remember one of the clients Krista and I have been working on, and she's like, this is what we're charging. And I went, ooh. And she's like, no, like, how many years experience do you have? What have you done? Look at all the clients. Look at what I've done. Look at my experience. The thousands of dollars in training I've done. And this is what we're charging.
And there's 2 of us.
And I went, oh, okay.
And we are passionate. Like, I honestly would rather help, you know, if it's one person for 1 year, you know, or, well, okay, maybe more than one, but I'm just saying, like, I'd rather have 10 than 100. Because what you just said, you can go deeper, and you know that you can help them to make the change that they need to get to the next level.
And sometimes it's like, if you're charting a course and you're on that course, So you need somebody, people listening out there, you do need somebody from an outside perspective to come in and say, hey, whoa, listen, you need to charge your worth.
Right.
And if you're not, then they're not your client anyways. They're not the ideal client. And I had a hard time with that. She literally was like, trying to.
Well, no, but the thing is, because I also know that the people are out there who need and are serious and want what we have. And, as well, like being part of this coaching program, if you have to pay for something, it's funny how the psychology works, that all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, you're a little bit more committed. If you give it away for free, then the expectation is almost like, well, you need to change my life for me. And then it's not a two-person type thing, right?
Yeah. There's even some psychology around that too, as far as if you're paying for something, you're not as committed, you're not going to show up, and it's not as valuable to you as when you're committing money to it. But another piece is even in bartering, as far as, I don't know if you guys understand or, know of the law of attraction and kind of what that really means. But in bartering, for instance, you're giving your services for somebody else's, that a lot of times, again, it comes to that mindset, well, I'm not really paying for this, so I can show up differently, versus I'm paying for this, you're paying for this, we're exchanging a paid service. So even when you're bartering and you're putting a value on something, you should actually have that money exchange, because it's that energy exchange that now puts legitimacy into what you're offering and what you're doing. That's huge. It's so important, because the thing is that if you're not charging money, or whatever it is that you're doing, you actually show up differently to how you're even giving but receiving.
That's a huge thing you just brought up, and I never thought of it in that point of view, because we had a really large print company, a chain across a good portion of Canada, and doing digital marketing, and we literally did an exchange of services, so print related services and everything. But the owner really had very little, he was like, okay, you know what I mean? He wasn't like really engaged, you know what I mean?
You weren't a priority, because he wasn't actually having money coming into his account. You end up being the last thing, I'll get to it because, well, you're getting it for free. But then all of a sudden when they show up to you, then they want their services high, top of the list. And you even act that other way. And it ends up like, it can actually end up creating broken relationships too, because of the fact that neither of you show up in the way that you would for a paying client. And it can
then all of a sudden you have your account managers having email fights on who did what wrong, and it's like I don't know, I just like, I guess it depends what you're trying to offer and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, I think for us, because we've been on both sides, right, and we understand being an entrepreneur and having employees and all that kind of stuff, it's like there's this passion to like really helping people understand things that can help them in their businesses. And I'm just getting excited because hearing you talk about this, I'm like, exactly, like people need this, they need to hear this, and they need to understand it, because it really doesn't have to be as complicated as we all have it in our heads for whatever reason,
It's it's a simple skill to learn, but it's not easy. Right. There are very basic things that you put into place, but it takes practice. And, sometimes people will ask, well, why do you offer like a 3 or 6 month package or work with people that long? Can't you get something really quick? It's like, I could. But the thing is if your level of skill is not there, I can give you a bunch of tips and send you off, but that's not going to help you. And it's going to look bad on me, because you're not going to be applying things and getting the help that you need along the way. So it's about putting it out there, practicing it, coming back, retweaking, coming back, and finding out like what you're hearing, because there's so much you can learn from, first of all, in communication, there can be a lot of breakdowns. I can say something, but you can totally make it mean something else. And it's something really great I heard, I think on another podcast, was that there's 4 places of communication. It's what you say, what you mean about what you say, what the person hears, and then what they make it mean.
Yes.
Right?
Wow.
And in communication, there can be a breakdown anywhere in those spots. So number one, sometimes they don't even hear what you're actually saying, the words you're actually saying. But for them to hear and get your meaning, like that takes a high level of listening and skill to really like work around and create the context of words, right? So that is something that you need to learn. But also one thing you guys said earlier when you just gave prices and people went, like, oh my gosh, that was a lot. That's okay. Sometimes it is a gut check for people like, oh my gosh, like that was more than what I thought.
Yeah.
But if they're not like, okay, well, I just can't, like if they don't completely shut down, they're in contention because now they're like, okay, but you know, you're adding value to it. And as long as, you know, you're showing your value and not in a defensive way.
Yes.
Like you built that value before. Because if you're waiting for the reaction, you've already lost it.
Yeah.
You know, if you have to then defend yourself at that point in time. Now you can add things. Well, remember we had talked about this and this and this, and you need this. When people go to price, their mind goes to that number and they forget about everything else that was said before. So sometimes you got to bring them back.
Yeah.
But it's okay to get that gut check because sometimes it's like, oh, well, how many people don't like, you know, even unless you have thousands and millions of dollars laying around, even those people will have that type of reaction because something they never thought about before, or how comprehensive your services are and how much money that's actually going to save them. It just sounds like a big number up front.
Yeah.
It can be scary. Like anytime putting out a big, you know, gosh, I got carpet just in the last month and they gave me the number. I was like, what? Like, you know, but I needed to do it and I justified it and I made it happen.
Every time we take our family out to dinner and we get the bill, we do the same thing. What? Seriously?
Yeah, we have a debate about that on Friday afternoons if we're going out to the lake. Like, we're not going to McDonald's. There's too many kids here.
The kids always want extra cheese on their poutine. And all they ever eat is the cheese.
Are we going to go down this road here?
I don't know. I just felt like talking about it.
Perception of value, really. It does. It's about perception of value, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And you know, and there's places that will nickel and dime you. And the thing is a lot of times low cost things, and this is even something in anybody's service. If you want to be the low cost leader, you know what, you're actually sacrificing a lot of clients that could be really good clients because they look at that and they go, what am I not getting at that price? You know, okay, fine, it's easy right now, but are there going to be things that creep up? And you know, is it comprehensive? And okay, well, if this person is charging this, they must not be very experienced. And, and that's not necessarily the truth, right? You know, so even the perception of pricing, it's like, well, you have to justify it, you know, as far as to yourself and figure out your numbers and your budgeting and that. But you're looking at what you're getting for the dollar value, and it's justifiable. You just have to let people get that, let that sink in, have their reaction happen. It's just a natural human phenomenon that we have reactions.
Yeah.
And you got to be okay with that. And it's nothing about you. It's just they went through what they went through. Now let's talk. Like, you know, they're back. So.
Well, and a lot of people, they'll from an uneducated perspective, have a pre-framed amount of money in the top of their head as to what they think they should invest in, whatever it is, right? So, and
normally it's wrong.
Yeah, normally it's wrong. Exactly.
Normally it's so much lower than what it really is. But even think about, you know, when we try and budget our time, how many times do you say, well, this should take me an hour and it takes you 3?
Yeah.
Like, we're just not good budgeters.
Yes.
Like, time, money, it's always going to cost more than what you think. It's always going to take more time than what you think. And you should take your budget and multiply it so then you actually can be in a reasonable phase. And that's with time and money. Would you guys agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm bad about that because I let people, or I give a lot of time. She gave me the look.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a learning thing. And, you know, I mean, we understand that because, you know, being online and whatnot, we can see, you know, how you can really leverage, you know, your time and stuff like that. So like, I always talk about, for me, like, I'm 4 years into figuring this out because when I left my corporate job, I decided to stay home with my kids. Well, I also knew that just the type of person I wasn't going to be running around baking cookies all day. Like I needed something for myself. I'm independent. So I started my online business from home, and it was more to give me something to do. And it was a hobby more or less. And it kind of turned into more of a business. But I had the time to, learn and discover and go through all of those things that I needed to see that there was a better way, right? That I didn't have when I was working in that 9 to 5, because I was exhausted mentally, whatever. Then you come home and you get caught in this thing, right? So even though I've been in his ear for a couple years and a lot more forceful in the last 8 months, let's say. In all fairness, he was caught in that rat race of, doing things the way the majority of society does, right? So the time thing is, it's really switching from that dollar per hour to, leveraging your time and being valuable. It's a hard shift in your head.
Yeah. There's another thing too. So it's not just about your time, but it's also about where you get your accountability and help and support. When we all work in a corporate job, a lot of times we have a boss. Yeah. We have coworkers, team members that we can go to for specific things. We have a network that a lot of times in companies, they have the HR support and that. When you become an entrepreneur, now you're everything.
Yeah.
And many times you lost your complete professional support network. And it's so important to have a mentor, have some sort of support coach. I highly recommend that any coach have a coach. It's like psychiatrists. All psychiatrists have a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I'm a sales coach. I have a sales coach. Even though you'd think, well, okay, she knows sales and everything, but it's because you cannot always do what you're doing to yourself.
Yeah.
Because your blind spots, and you also need kind of somebody to guide you in ways that you think out of the box, but also for you to learn new skills that you can bring to your clients and to the people you're serving.
Yeah.
And that has, for me, probably been one of the biggest success secrets, that I've invested in mentors, sometimes high level, and put myself in big communities. To get that support, because of the fact that you can't do it alone. And if you do, it's going to take even longer.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you've kind of lost your vision or your passion behind it, because focusing and doing all the things that isn't what really, drives you. Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? Oh my God, I just had like an epiphany when you talked about that, because I remember being at a point going, oh my God, like I'm used to working in an environment, and you don't realize how everybody works together, where I could say, okay, guys, this is what we have to do. And there's this whole organization of thousands of people making this one thing work. Right. And that's when I kind of realized, like you put it into really good words here, but when I realized that in my head, it was like, I had this talk with myself, like, okay, you have to figure out where to get different kind of support. And I did the same thing, but it was like, oh man, I lost my train of thought.
Did you?
It was so good.
Krista, if you're anything like me,
this,
if you're anything like me, you're also really hard on yourself about not knowing those things.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I gave myself permission to say, you know what? It is just me. And I had this army of people, working together. So what I have to do is stop. You get to a point where it's like, you can't do it all yourself. You can keep trying. You can't. And, and I would sometimes be frustrated with him, because he'd be like, I talked to him about, stuff, and he would say, well, you just have to do this. I'm like, oh yeah, just do that. Right. And I still do that with him.
Oh yeah.
But I'm like, you also have a team of people. When you go to work, you have staff, you could easily say, just do this, and people do it. So you're also going to be learning that too. Cause I get frustrated. I'm like, cause he's really good at what you're talking about, like sales and networking. So he could keep the sales coming in all day long, but I'm like, stop!
We need to deliver.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right, you got to have the logistics behind you, got to have the infrastructure. If you can't deliver, all your efforts for sales go away, but also now your message that you're selling is actually being degraded because that you can't follow through, and that can hurt your business even more.
Absolutely.
If you oversell for what you can deliver. Yeah.
So that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm sure there'll be people listening to, you know, just even though I'm out of that spot, like I felt that feeling again, and it's so overwhelming, right? So just know that,
and going back to just a coach needs a coach, you know, I think of my life previous, like I remember being a sponge, reading lots of books, you know, going to a couple seminars, learning just from the organizations I was in before. And then somewhere along the lines, it was like, I thought I knew everything, or you know what I mean? You do.
Yeah.
Like, I got it. And then what happens is times change, everything's going on, and it's accelerating, in fact. And you go through this arc, and then all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, like I got to do a huge amount of catch up. So the amount of learning that I've learned just in the last year is more than I think I've really learned in the last probably 5 years or
40.
more.
Well, and that's actually a symptom of complacency too, because we learn what we need to know for our job and we stop there, or we just, we just work on those things that are specific to our job, and we forget about all that other stuff that's out there. And and that's why people change jobs, right? Because they hit a place, they hit a plateau that things are feeling boring. They don't feel like they're growing as a person or learning because they're doing the same thing over and over. Okay, great. How many times can you say it? Like, that's where I felt. I'm like, how many times can I say the same thing over and over? I mean, as a trainer, I had to think of so many different ways of repackaging the same message month after month and year after year. And there's a point where it's just like, wow, like I feel like I'm saying the same things and I don't have the same passion behind it anymore. And I'm not learning, I'm not progressing. So where's the next step? And that's exactly where you are. And in the entrepreneurial world, you know, for people that are thinking about going into that, there is a huge learning curve, and it's okay that you have to learn and you kind of have to become that student again. And the thing is anytime if you feel like you know everything, go back to school or go, put yourself, get a book or something, because you always learn something.
Yeah. If you think you know everything, you're in that danger zone, especially
totally.
If you're a mid-level, like you've got a sizable business. You're like, then I think probably in retrospect now, you're successful despite yourself, or can be, but at some point things change, life changes, people don't like change, so.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question. You have you're married, right?
Yes.
Your husband, is he an entrepreneur?
He is not. He is as far from it as possible. He wants to just work for somebody else, show up and pretty much, do his job. In fact, for many years he did that. This is in the last year he got a new position, which now has him actually be a little more upfront and have to kind of create things instead of just showing up and doing his job. So but it's challenging because he's not in that entrepreneurial mindset for me sometimes, because I get frustrated over some things, or I get frustrated with myself and he just doesn't quite get it.
Yes.
But then he always tells me I'm way too hard on myself, and okay, I get that. I am very much kind of that driver type, and get things done and high expectations and that type of thing with myself. But yeah, so he's not, and I don't know if we could ever be in business together unless he's behind the scenes doing something.
It's, I might have talked about this on another episode, I'm not sure, but I just like to talk about it because I've been on both sides of the fence. Like, I was still in my corporate job before I ever stepped into the entrepreneur world on my own. I think when I look back, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, right? And always knew I was going to do my own thing. But, at the time, I remember feeling kind of like it's hard to be married to an entrepreneur, because he was the one who, I guess, was the entrepreneur. And I've learned a lot from him too, and understanding, you know, you just can't always go to work for this time in your day and then shut it off. It's not really how it works, right? But
Right.
there's so much more behind it, because you also have a vision, and there's a passion that lights you, and all these other dynamics. So I have a whole new appreciation now, and being on the other side, I just want to kind of bring light to that to people as well, to be maybe a little bit more patient with the entrepreneur in the house, and encouraging, right? To understand that it's just not our fault. Like, it's in the blood, right?
Yeah.
That's totally, I mean, I've been the same way. I've always tried different ventures and things here and there. And this was the first time I went full out on my own, and, you know, it was like, okay, this is really, really my own thing now.
Yeah.
And it's exciting and scary. Right?
Oh, totally. And, you know, one thing I would say is that, especially with people that, number one, work from home, or entrepreneurs, especially that work from home, is that one of the biggest things I get frustrated about is that it because I'm home, that all of a sudden I should be able to take care of some errands during the day, or that I now should be able to take care of the house, or whatever it is. You know, like, oh, wait, I have appointments too, and I have to take care of these things just because I'm at home. But on the other side, it's like, you know, we each have our chores, and he's just, oh, I'll get to that later. And I'm like, you don't understand. I see this 24 hours a day.
It's your environment.
Right? I do sleep some hours, but I'm here in this all day long. Yes, I have some appointments out and about that now it's in my face. You can leave the house and leave the mess behind, or leave whatever it is that you're in the middle of behind. I can't. It's right in front of me. And so that's what's frustrating to me, when things don't get taken care of, and you know, responsibilities aren't being kept up with. And that's probably one of the things we fight about the most, is just that it's not taking the home responsibilities, because I'm always here, or most of the time, right? And
it's like your office is messy because it is home, and you know what I mean? So I could totally get it. He goes into work, checks out, and he's got his stuff that he's doing for the day, but you're there. If the dishes are all piled up and everything, you're there. Like, you need your coffee.
Well, we sorted that out, I think, a couple years ago. And sometimes he still might complain, but I'll like straighten him out real quick. No, but it was like, you know what? Like, because I was also running this business from home with kids. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, hello, now that I'm on the other side of it, don't do that, guys. Like, get a nanny or put them in daycare. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
But, you know, that in itself is a full-time job. But again, putting pressure on yourself, right? Because it's like, well, I should be able to do all of this. No, you can't. And I remember kind of saying one time in probably one of our fights, I doubt we were talking, you know, over beautiful dinner about this, but you know, about
it wasn't a bottle of wine, started
maybe
candlelight.
But it was like, you know what? Like, again, it's about focus and your time, right? Yeah. So if I'm home and I'm working the business and doing all of this kind of stuff, you know, there's a reason why there are people who are paid to come into your house. You don't expect a house cleaner to come for 4 hours and clean your house and watch the kids and feed them and you know, call and book that doctor's appointment. No, they're very different roles. Mm-hmm. So I figured out that I'm probably worth at least $1,800 a month for nanny services, plus doing the work. So do you want me to be the nanny, or do you want me to be, you know what I mean? Like, it's,
Well, that's even the biggest struggle concept with even not even work at home moms, just moms that leave work to stay and be home with the kids. And I have a friend that her ex always thought that because now she was at home, that all of a sudden she wasn't doing anything, and she wasn't bringing any money in. And I'm like, but you are saving like
a lot of money.
3 kids between the two of them, and 4 kids total. Like
Yeah.
4 kids in daycare or, you know, and having babysitter services, the oldest one didn't really need it, but 3, you know, you're saving
It's the weight.
way more than what her income even was. That's why she came home. But now all of a sudden, because she's home, you're totally devaluing her services and what she's actually saving you.
Wow, that's actually really good.
And it is backwards, and it's true. It's like, you're right. And that's a lot of the deciding factors, to be honest, why, you know, women leave their careers, because it's the financial piece. It's like, then all of a sudden you're working all this time, you're away from your family, but you're not actually bringing any money because now it's going to someone watching your kids. So
right. But then you try and do that and have a business on top of it. And that just doesn't work, because now you're like in an appointment with a coach. I have a client that she'd show up and her kid would be interrupting every 5 minutes. I was fine with that. I'll roll with the punches. But how much more value are you going to get from that person you're paying for that's there to teach you and coach you?
Yeah.
I mean, is that worth having your child in daycare for a couple hours that day?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's incredible. I'll come home and I'm like easily distracted. Like, really, right? Where's the squirrel? There's
squirrel. Right.
You get to see the famous squirrel.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, I should have a squirrel.
So I do. I get easily distracted, and I'll come home and she will have a 4-year-old boy kind of like wrapped on her head. And then a daughter singing ABCs with her feet up on her knees, and Paw Patrol is going.
Yeah.
And the daughter has an iPad, and the little guy's got her phone, and she's on the laptop, like working away. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know how you're doing that.
Well, again, though, I've had a couple years of just working around it to some degree, but then, you know, there's a frustration too. And I'm just going to speak to this. We could talk all day. So, no, but I think it's important though to understand, because I also then was feeling like my time wasn't important, because when he gets home from work, it's like, hey, how's it going? You want to go for a walk? Do you want to? And I'm like, I'm working. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, or I don't get to work until, you know, 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And he would be like, why aren't you coming to bed? Like, you're staying up so late. That's why you're tired the next day. It's like, because that's when I get the time.
Yeah. The focus time.
But we did figure that out.
We
did.
I
think I get home and I'll try to take over everything I can for
But
her.
then I'm like, well, you should be helping me. And anyways.
Right.
That's a whole other
he can't win. He just can't win.
Yeah.
Help.
Anyways,
just goes, yes,
we're getting off on. Hey, wait.
Right.
I'm gonna give this to her.
Okay, that was
Okay,
me
there
this
you
time.
go. So, one of the things we would like to always ask is, what do you think is your superpower? What's your secret superpower?
Well, I think you've already learned that the sales is my superpower. And it's funny that you ask it in that way, because I actually delivered a talk last week about your unleashing your natural sales superpower. So I teach people about their natural sales superpower too. So that's my superpower, is teaching that.
Awesome. I can totally see that.
I can too. Yeah, you've given me lots of things to think about, actually, just in the approach and everything, because it was good. So
awesome.
Do you have a question for us?
Oh my gosh. You know, I think we've talked and everything about this. It's so cool. But, you know, what do you find is the biggest thing that you deal with clients, like in marketing, when it comes to sales? Because we already distinguished they're two different things, but they need to go together. From your view, what do you see is the biggest issue that people have?
The biggest issue for sales or for marketing?
For sales, or how they fit together, that the people have that missing link. Like, what's that missing link that you see a lot of times in your clients?
Yeah, I think that there can be a lot of times there's a disconnect between the marketing and what's being proposed to be done versus, you know, once they come in and then they're actually being sold on it and interacting with the company. You know, I'm not going to pick on any niche, but really, you know, like in auto, let's say, where you have an advertisement and you get there and then it really isn't what you expected. So that kind of speaks to the authenticity side. And that's something I've always been passionate about, is like, okay, if you are doing marketing and you're broadcasting something, you're making sure that you are authentic in what you're trying to communicate, and that when they do come in and interact with you and go through the sales process, that there's cohesion. And I think that a lot of times that's where knowing your audience, like we've woven this all together already, but I do see a theme in that with people that are struggling with their business and how to drive leads in, and then how to actually onboard them and have them as clients.
Yeah,
I feel it's intentional.
I'm sorry?
Do you feel it's intentional?
Not really, no.
No. So it's a blind spot that a lot of people have.
I'm sorry?
It's a blind spot that a lot of people have.
Yeah, it absolutely is a blind spot.
I think too that sometimes just thinking about a lot of businesses, I feel, are really focused on getting new clients all the time, and they forget about the ones that they already have and how to nurture that and give them the next thing. And they think that, they don't have any other services or whatnot, and it's so not true, and I'm guilty of that too. It's like, okay, you got to get new clients, which is great. But why keep spending your marketing dollars to get new ones when you already have people who have pulled out that credit card, and most of the time, if someone's done business with you, they want more from you too, right? Mm-hmm. So helping people understand that is really where, your long-term clientele is.
Right.
So,
well, it's like dating, right? You date, and then you finally get that person that says they want to be your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. You can't just hang out and just be here. You still have to develop that and nurture that relationship, right? Yeah. There's next levels, or otherwise it's going to not work. Same thing with clients. Okay, they come to your door, they buy something from you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you stop taking care of them.
Yeah.
Because the nurturing piece is also taking care of them and building the relationship. It's not just about selling them something more. It's about even supporting them with what they have versus putting all of your attention on those people, the unknowns, the people you're trying to draw in. And it's interesting how many people don't understand that the majority of very successful businesses are successful because probably at least a third to even 50% of their business is repeat.
Yeah.
Depending on, what type of product that they have. I mean, look at Apple. I mean, their satisfaction rates are like 78 they hover between like a 78 to like 80% satisfaction rate, and even referral rate, but also they have people buying their new product every year. Do you need a new phone every year? No, but you buy it because you're so loyal to the brand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So, and I think that's the thing where, for me, the passion comes of, helping businesses understand and see that too, because it's just a different way of thinking, and there are strategies and things you can do to do that. So there's a bit of a disconnect there from what I've seen.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so Kelly, how can our listeners or viewers get a hold of you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, so I am located at www.kellysample.com, and that's Kelly with an I, sample.com. And I can be reached there, and there's contact information there, but also people can send me an email at kellysample.com. So as long as it's Kelly with an I, so Kelli, at kellysample.com, people can get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Okay. And they can find you on Facebook too, I imagine.
Yep, I'm on Facebook as well. The tag is, I could give you that for maybe if you're doing show notes as well, and the links there, but it's just Kelly Sample Coaching will get you to my business, business Facebook page.
Okay,
Perfect.
yeah, we'll be sure to share that link as well, so people can reach out if they want to do that.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your time again. We have gone over our time, but it's because people like you are so awesome to talk to.
Thank you.
I had so much fun. Oh my gosh. It was just
appreciate it. Take care.
I appreciate it too. You guys take care too.